So here we go. Thanks for tuning in. We're excited and we hope that we can deliver some serious value to you guys tonight and help educate you on what can potentially be a pretty powerful boost to your retirement strategy. So I guess just as a way of introduction for anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Drake Blaybaum. I'm with Neo Home Loans. By trade, I'm a mortgage loan officer, but I've been investing in real estate for almost 20 years now. I bought my first property as a house hack back in 2005, before house hacking, I think, was even, that term was coined. I bought a fourplex in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Salt Lake City. I still hold that property today, and it's probably the crown jewel in the different properties that I own. And I just feel very passionately that owning real estate can be a massive boon to people's retirement strategy, because it is such a powerful vehicle, and we'll kind of talk through why that is. And then I've got my friend Julia here, and I'll let you do your own intro.
Yeah. I think everyone on the call knows me, but I'm with Windermere, been doing real estate here now for a couple of years. And like Drake, I think that was a big part of me joining real estate. I was just really passionate about being able to help people not only get in homes that they really enjoy, but have it be part of their investment strategy. And so helping people with that journey and kind of being on their financial team, like that's kind of Drake and I's thing. We want to kind of propose ourselves as like part of people on your financial team to like help you look at things in a different way so that you can make smart financial decisions that will help you kind of grow your wealth and do good things for you. So
right on. Well, yeah, so the title of this presentation is Turning Your Low Interest Rate into an Asset. So I'm assuming that most of the people on this call have either already bought in the last few years or bought a while ago and refinanced into some of those historically low interest rates in the 2020 to 2022 time. And that really is, the low interest rate that you locked into that time, it really is an asset. And we're going to show you why that is and how you can use that to become what one of my favorite real estate coaches and investors, Chad Carson, calls a small and mighty investor. And what he defines that as is someone who has just enough properties to support their lifestyle needs so that they can make work optional and spend time doing the things that matter. And so, my goal when I started investing in real estate is, frankly, I wanted to retire yesterday, right? I'm into outdoor stuff. I'd rather be skiing with my kids, camping, floating rivers, running through mountains. And so real estate is my chosen vehicle to build that cash flow so that I have the option to not work sooner. Not that I don't like what I do, but I like being in other places as well. Do you have any comments on that, Julia?
Yeah, I feel like I've been hearing a lot of people that maybe have just outgrown their current situation, but they're like, I've got this like amazing interest rate, but my house doesn't really work for me. And so I think just giving you guys the tools and educating you on how you can like use this home that you're in now and leverage it to get in a new home and an opportunity, to leverage your money in a way that you wouldn't normally in order to like acquire investment properties, because typically you need to have 20% down. So now you got to keep this low interest rate and get into a new house with the equity that you have, since the equity is just kind of really blown up in the last couple of years. And so just want to give people advice and empower them to kind of like start their investing journey and kind of just be a good resource for you guys. So we're excited to kind of dive into it.
Yeah, so that's actually a great point. If you own a home or have bought a home in the last few years or refinance in the last few years, you have a historic opportunity to create cash flow. When people call me to say, oh, I want to buy an investment property, I say, my response typically is, cool, do you have the 25% down, right? And so what I tell people is generally the lowest hanging fruit. If you're not in the home that you want to be in, if you're not in your dream home, the easiest way to start investing in real estate is go buy another primary residence and turn your home into a rental property. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And that's the sort of overarching theme here. We want to teach you guys how to feel confident in doing that, even if it's not now, if it's in 5 years.
Yeah.
Just doing that one time, one rental property can change the entire trajectory of your retirement portfolio. So let's get into it. So speaking of retirement portfolios, oh, in fact, we better share the screen, huh?
Yeah, we better share the screen.
Thank you for that. All right, let's see here. Share. Let's see, I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. One more try.
I think it looks good.
Was that the right screen?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. I didn't see the green thing. So, okay. So turning your low interest rate into an asset. That's what we're talking about tonight. So first of all, let's talk through.
Actually, I'm curious, would everybody put in the chat if you feel comfortable what your interest rate is? Just kind of curious to see what people's interest rates are.
That is a good question. So while you're doing that, let's roll into, this is a recent survey that just came out about what people think they need to save for retirement. Okay, this is from CNBC and it's broken down by age bracket, right? So across all ages, people think that they're going to need about $1.3 million to retire. And it varies by decade, maxing out in the 50s of thinking they're going to need $1.6 million to retire. The problem with this is that you can see on the right, the yellow bars, that's what people currently have saved. So if you're in your 50s and you think you need $1.6 million to retire and you only have 110,000, you have a long way to go, right? You're going to be working for a long time. So the problem is that our country has shifted to a model where funding retirement is on you. It used to be on your employer and on the government, but nowadays, most of the burden has been shifted onto you. And the problem is that people just aren't getting there for the most part, as you can see demonstrated in the slide. Do you have any comments on that, Julia?
Yeah, I think too, just, obviously I think it's great to, I'm not a financial planner or financial advisor, but I think it's great to diversify your portfolio. Obviously stocks go up and down and we know that they typically always go up, but we know for sure that the price of real estate always goes up. And that's why I think a lot of people, wealthy people or just financially literate people, have real estate as part of their portfolio and know that that's going to be part of their retirement plan. So
yeah, there's also a lot of benefits with real estate in terms of using leverage that you don't get by using stocks. So for example, if you buy $20,000 worth of stocks and you get 10% appreciation, you made $2,000. If you buy use $20,000 to buy real estate, that's 5% down on a $400,000 home. Now, if that $400,000 home goes up 10%, you made $40,000 and you've doubled your money, right?
Yeah.
So
that's tax benefits, and there's just so much more to it. Obviously, there is a cost to being a landlord, emotionally, financially, whatever. But I think it's just figuring out if that fits into your plan, knowing what the return can be and knowing what the benefits can give you. So
yeah, and I would just argue, like, it's hard to save $1.6 million for retirement, right? Like, that's a lot of money. And you can see that people just aren't hitting that for the most part. And so, if you were to, of course, use your 401ks and IRAs and use all those tax advantage vehicles and save as much as you can, but also just move one time, right? And keep your old house. That just doing that one time, you could meet essentially that $1.6 million mark if you hold that original home till it's paid off. And someone else pays it off for you.
Yep.
So yeah, real estate can be pretty powerful that way. So like I said, the historical way of funding your retirement, the old way, we're going to jump into our next slide, was, a lot of our parents and grandparents, they would get a job, a W-2 job, they'd get a degree, they'd avoid debt, they'd put money in savings, and they'd accumulate assets, right? And, you'd work for 40 years for GM or GE and you get a pension, combine that with Social Security and you're set, right? You've got consistent income for the rest of your life. Well, pensions have largely gone away. And even, I'm friends with a lot of firefighters, and even those guys do have pensions, but they've eroded, the pensions have eroded significantly over the years. So they're not as powerful as they used to be. So again, the country is shifting towards, you have to fund these 401ks, these IRAs, these things. But as you can see in the previous slide, people just aren't doing it. So what I'm proposing is there's a little bit of a new way that we have to approach things as people that are saving up for comfortable retirements. You have to be a little bit of an entrepreneur. You have to have financial literacy and use all the tools that you can at your disposal. You have to use leverage, right? Like buying real estate, and you have to invest. You can't just save. You have to beat inflation, right? You can't just put your money in a savings account and let it sit there. You have to invest it and grow and beat accumulation. And then you have to accumulate cash flow, because ultimately cash flow on a monthly basis is what pays your bills, right? $1.6 million doesn't pay your bills every month. Pulling the cash flow off of that every month does. So if you can, if you have one piece of paid off real estate, that cash flow, say it's $5,000 a month, could cover all of your monthly needs, right? And then maybe your other assets can fund your fun stuff. Just a thought. Any comments on that?
I mean, I think a lot of people maybe look at this like new way and think this is like super overwhelming and I don't want to have a side hustle and all these things. And I totally understand that. And I think it's important to realize like what drives you and what's important to you. And like, if it's investing in stocks, if it's investing in real estate, if it is having a side hustle, but like you do need to kind of be creative and find another way to make money and leverage your money and invest. And I think too, just, growing up, we don't really learn that much about being financially literate and like just hacks. And I think we do have to kind of go that extra mile now in order to get ahead or even keep up, like, not even to mention just the value of the dollars just changed so much. Like, at least for me, I used to always think like, if I could just make $100,000, like I'll have everything I need. And now with inflation, it's like 200 or 250. And you can't always just get that from your normal day-to-day job. So I think it's like thinking outside the box and being creative. And like everybody on this call is in a unique situation that like, okay, you've got this low interest rate, you've got a home. So there are ways that you can already start doing this, leveraging your equity, figuring out a way to cash flow. And so that's really what we want to be supporting you on. So.
Yeah. I read an article a little while back that called millennials the unluckiest generation, right? And
that's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah, right. I mean, the reason for that is, right, like college costs exploded, right? Housing costs exploded. And just the things I mentioned before, right? Like you don't have pensions like you used to. So it just feels like there's more headwinds, whereas our parents had more maybe tailwinds, right? Coming out of the great, and grandparents had tailwinds coming out of the Great Depression, right? So anyway, I would just argue that you have to come up with some additional thing because people just aren't hitting that mark. So that said, right, Social Security can be there. That can be part of your retirement plan. But this is directly from the Social Security website. Social Security is intended to replace about 40% of your annual pre-retirement earnings. And you can actually go on their website and plug in, you can look up your own Social Security stats. Then you can also kind of project that forward and see what you're going to have from Social Security in the sort of best case scenario going forward. But again, it's only supposed to replace about 40% of your pre-retirement earnings. Now, this section in purple here that's highlighted, this is from the website as well. The trust fund will only be able to pay 100% of total scheduled benefits until 2033, 1 year earlier than reported last year. At the time, 2033, the fund's reserves will become depleted and continuing program income will be sufficient to pay 77% of scheduled benefits. So in other words, Social Security has a math problem. It used to be that there were a lot of young people supporting a few old people. Now there's a lot of old people and there's not as many young people feeding that system. And so they're going to have to make some changes to it, whether that's delaying retirement, means testing Social Security, or any other thing, any of those other things. Like I'm sure a lot of you heard over the news over the last summer, there was rioting in Europe in France, when they raised the retirement age from 62 to 64. It's the same thing that's happening here. What do you have comments on that, Julia?
Yeah, and I think, one thing to keep in mind with retirement, it's like, hopefully you have your house paid off, hopefully you're on Medicare, so you do have less expenses. But imagine if you had, even the one house that's paid off and you're getting all that passive income every month that allows you to pay and have a life still, and just, that can be your retirement if you don't have that money in Social Security. And so just kind of looking at it that way.
Yeah, and so if we're thinking that your Social Security is going to cover 40% of your annual pre-retirement earnings, where's the other 60% going to come from, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize financial advisors use what's called the 4% rule. And an easier way to think of that is 25 times earnings. So if you think to yourself, just for simplicity, say that 60% of your pre-retirement earnings is $10,000 a month. That means that's $120,000 a year. You need 25 times that before you can retire. That's a lot of money, right? So 25 times your annual earnings. So is it easier to save that giant pile of money, or is it easier to move one time and turn your old house into a rental property, right? So
Yeah.
Cool. The good news, though, if you bought or refinanced in 2020 to 2022, is that you have a 5,000-year low interest rate. So this is kind of an interesting study that BofA Global Research did, coordinating with some others. But they went back and studied interest rates all the way back to 3000 BC. And you can see that the light blue line, the long-term interest rates, are the lowest that they were ever in history in that 2020 to 2022 period. So if you lock that in, that's why we're saying, and keep circling back to the fact that this is such an asset, such a big deal if you've secured this thing.
Yeah, which when we were putting this together, I didn't even know that there were mortgages and interest rates in 3000 BC, but Drake said that they're mentioned in the Bible, so they must have been. But yeah, just to echo on what he said, it's like, I feel like a lot of people that I talk to are like, I just can't move. I've got this super low interest rate. And I think, most realtors would be like, nope, let's sell your house, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I want to encourage you guys to keep your assets, look at this interest rate, and you're like, really realize like, you could probably make money off of it every month out the gate, like tomorrow, because of your interest rate. And so just because your house doesn't work for you now, like, let's find a solution. Like, let's look at your personal plan and come up with a plan together, because like Drake said, this will probably never happen again. And so if you can hold on to that and leverage that, then it's going to be an asset to you guys long-term.
Yeah. And a cool thing about, you guys probably all, I would imagine, have 30-year fixed rates. Warren Buffett calls the 30-year fixed rate the most powerful instrument ever created, because it's a one-way bet, right? You guys are probably never going to refinance your rates any lower. But the cool thing is, because of inflation, you're always going to be paying that back with dollars that are less and less valuable. So in other words, your mortgage payment is capped. It's never going to change. And you're going to pay it back. Well, if you turn it into rental, your tenants are going to pay it back. But over time, your wages and rents are going to continue to rise. And so that delta between your payment and the rents is going to get larger and larger over time. And so that's what's so beautiful about it. As a landlord or as an owner of a property with a fixed rate mortgage, inflation benefits you, right? It's kind of one of the only times that inflation as your friend is owning real estate with fixed rate mortgages. So congratulations if you have one. So the next piece of it is value, right? And a lot of people, like you said, Julia, are kind of scared, right? The market's funky, right? Rates are higher. They're worried that housing is going to potentially crash because of the higher rates and the market slowing down. But what this slide is showing is these are quotes from Diana Olick, who's CNBC's senior real estate correspondent. And she's incorrectly called 13 of the last 0 housing crashes. Okay, so these are quotes from her headlines over the last 8 years regarding housing. October 2015, she said housing is a bubble larger than in 2006. So that year, homes appreciated 5%, and someone who bought a $300,000 home in that far right column saw their $300,000 home go up to a $315,000 value. Okay, and you can see over the next 7 years here, every time she keeps calling negative information about the housing market, but it just keeps marching higher. And if you would have listened to the sort of major media narrative during that time, someone that would have bought a $300,000 house in 2015 lost out on over $200,000 of appreciation over that time period.
Yeah. And I think, in general, like we do hear a lot of just doom and gloom on the news, and a lot of times too, it's on a national level. And although there are trends and data and things that affect each market because of national information, it might not be specific to your actual market or where you own property. So just know that you can always come ask me questions and to go to an actual expert on what's going on in your area. And I think too, ultimately, whatever decision you guys make, it's got to feel right for you. So like, the biggest thing is we want you guys to have the information and feel empowered instead of making a decision out of fear, or do you know what I mean? So I think just the biggest thing is for you guys to feel empowered and come ask me questions. If you're like, is this really what's going on? I'll give it to you straight. I'll give you data. I can set you up with neighborhood updates for where your house is so you can see what your neighbor's house sold for, just stuff like that. Like really try to go to a local person instead of listening. I don't know if anyone listens to the radio, but just the doom and gloom that the news gives, And
so, yeah, I mean, this is what most people are listening to on a daily basis, right? It's the large media news networks, and it scares most people into inaction, right? But here's what Wall Street is doing. Wall Street is set to own 40% of the single family rental homes in the nation. So this decade, they're predicted to own 40% of single family rentals. Why would they do that? Well, hedge funds are buying these up because they understand that there's an inherent shortage in the number of homes across the country. There's just not enough homes for families that need homes. The way that that's calculated is based on what's called housing starts. So that's the number of homes built each year. And that's been averaging around 900,000 units for single family homes over the last recently. However, household formations, so in other words, the creation of new homes, right? Like I have a 5-person family, my wife and I and 3 kids, but when my kids grow up and move out, we're one household, that just turned into 4 households, right? And so household creation has been averaging around 1.4 million. So even right now, we're still short about 500,000 homes a year for the number of people that need homes. So what happens when there is no supply and lots of demand? Prices go up.
Yeah. And what Drake posted about this on his Instagram, and we were talking about it pretty in depth. And it's like I said, I feel like the media wants people to think like this is such a bad time because of interest rates, but because of that, there is less competition in the market, which you're not going to feel like you're getting as good of a deal maybe, but the way it is, it's like you buy high, you sell high, you buy low, you sell low. And, it sounds like most people bought in the pandemic, you probably paid a lump sum of cash over the purchase price, which isn't happening as frequently now, and that you will be able to refinance. But when you see all these businesses purchasing, hundreds of thousands of properties across the country, it's because their data analyst team has been like doing all this research and they see this gap in the market that it's a really good opportunity to buy. And they know as soon as rates drop, there's going to be a frenzy and prices will shoot up. Affordability is going to get worse and it's going to be back to that market, if not worse, because there's even more pent up demand now that time's gone on. Like Drake said, that more households have changed, that the next time that rates drop, it's just kind of going to be a frenzy. And so I think we also want to talk about this now because there obviously is a lot of skepticism around affordability right now, but you can get in at a more affordable price knowing that you can refinance, which the experts are telling us that rates will drop hopefully into the 5% by next year, which is really soon. And, just on the families growing, especially in Utah, people have a lot more kids. And so this problem of less real estate and less homes and where people can live is an even bigger problem in Utah. And I think too, one thing to think about if you want to have kids down the line, if you have kids down the line, when you retire, when you pass, these are homes that your kids can inherit. There's things that people will do, like once my kid's 18, they can have this house, they can sell it, they can live in it, they can manage it as a business. So there's other ways that, like owning real estate and having this as part of your like financial plan can really help you and your family long term too. So
yeah. So yeah, there really is an opportunity for, because of the supply shortage of homes, if you own property, it's really gonna drive the price higher in the long term. So it's just fundamentally, real estate is in a good position to grow in value over time. Cool. And that leads us to Mr. Warren Buffett, because this is one of my favorite quotes, right? We're in a time where people are fearful, and that's when the good deals are. When everyone thinks it's a great time to buy, it's probably the wrong time to buy. Did you want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to put this one in here because I think it's just a fun reminder to take risks. And I feel like it's a pretty low risk in investing in real estate, but just a lot of times we miss out on opportunities out of fear, and really great things can come from taking big risks. And so we just thought this would be kind of fun to put in.
Yeah. And so I follow this Fannie Mae Consumer Home Price Sentiment Survey that comes out monthly. And as of June, only 22% of consumers polled say that it's a good time to buy a home, right? So in other words, only 22% of people, 82% of people think it's a bad time to buy a home, right? So in my mind, consumers are hearing that, and that's what they're thinking. Meanwhile, Wall Street is set to invest billions of dollars in buying single family rentals.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the be greedy when others are fearful. So cool. So let's just do a little case study. This is going to show the average. This chart shows the average cumulative appreciation since 1991. Nationwide, it's 300%. If you're in Utah, we actually led the country at 587, almost 588% appreciation since 1991. Okay, that's a lot. So just to give a case study, right? In 1991, if you bought a home for $200,000, which was a really nice home in 1991, 2023, it's worth 1.176 million. And I know that sounds insane, but I can fully attest to that. I moved to Salt Lake in 1987, and my parents bought a block away from Immigration Market, and they bought their home for like $125,000.
Yeah.
And it's literally a stone's throw from Immigration Market. Now that neighborhood, you can't sniff anything for under $1 million, right?
Yeah, I sold 2 homes last year that were like original grandma homes that were both purchased for around $60,000, and they both sold over $600,000, and they had no loan. So they walked away with all that money. or they could have, done something else with it, but they, so I think it's totally true.
But let's think about this. If you put a 10% down payment on that home, okay, your return on investment would be 5,878%, right? Because you didn't just earn on your 20,000, you earned on the value of the home, the 200,000. So that just shows you the power, right? Like, and most people, or a lot of people, don't realize you can buy a home with as little as 5% down, even if you already own a home. Right? So you can go buy your next home with just as little as 5% down. So continuing on that trend, talking about appreciation. So what we did is we went through and documented each year what the home appreciation was by decade. Okay, so in these little boxes, these green boxes, like in the 40s, you'll see 1942, it appreciated 3%, 1943, 11%. So for total for the 40s decade was 129%. 50s were not as good, 60s were not as good, 70s were quite strong. But you can see the numbers in green, those are all positive appreciation years. We had one neutral year where it didn't appreciate in 1955. The 80s, we had appreciation every year. The 90s, we had a little bit of a down year in 1990, flat year in 1991, 0%, but then we're still in the green. 2000s, we still had solid appreciation all the way through the 2000s until we hit the Great Recession. 2007, we had starting some negative years, right? But still for the decade, 66% up. 2010s, we were still dealing with a little bit of the Great Recession, but by the time we exited 2010s, 45%. 2020s, we're already up 39%. And to sort of speak to that, most in 27 out of 50 markets, major markets across the country, we had a dip, right? As when interest rates went up, prices started to dip just a little bit into the fall and the winter. They bottomed out with, around a 6% pullback in December. And in 27 of 50 markets, prices are already back to or above where they were their all-time highs in June of 2022, even with rates in the high 6s and low 7s.
Yeah.
So
we're definitely seeing that in our market. Like June was really like Memorial Day, which just went down, down, down. December was actually, in my opinion, I think like the best time to buy. People that weren't fearful got really amazing deals. And then now we're about where we were when it started to drop last year. And I think it's even going to climb back up. And if we see rates drop, it'll surpass it again. So
yeah, and the reason is there's just not enough homes, right? People aren't selling. The problem in the Great Recession was that so many people had to sell because they were upside down in mortgages they couldn't afford, that they weren't really qualified to get in the first place. And so we had this glut of homes on the market, and that forced prices down. Now everybody's in the most well underwritten mortgages in history, and they all have low interest rates. So they're locked up in their homes and they're not moving and nothing's for sale. And so that's why prices are continuing and will continue to increase.
Yeah. And do you know what the percentage is? I think it's like 80% of mortgages are under 4%.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So
people can afford the homes that they're in. That was the problem in the Great Recession, is they couldn't underlying afford the payments of the homes, and so they lost them.
Yeah.
But real estate is an asset class that's up 73 out of 80 years. 73 out of the last 80 years, and paid, in the case study we just did, paid a 6,000% rate of return. So it's a pretty solid asset class generally. So it's a 73 win, 7-year loss, and 1 tie. Okay. So home ownership, as we talked about a little bit too, is also a hedge against inflation. And I think that's really the most powerful thing in real estate, is that your payment stays the same, but your income goes up with time and inflation, and so does rent. rent goes up. Historically, I've seen varying numbers, but the most conservative one I could find was historically rent increases about 2.7% per year. That means your rent is going to double every 26 years. So if your house today could rent for $3,000 a month, in 26 years, it'll rent for $6,000 a month, and your payment will stay the same, right?
Yeah.
And that's where that cash flow is generated. I always say real estate is not a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
It's a get rich for sure scheme. It just takes a long time.
Yeah. Which all good things take time.
Yeah.
I mean, and keep in mind, obviously your taxes and insurance are likely going to go up. So your payment won't always stay the same. Although I just got my taxes thing in the mail yesterday and mine went down. And the
Nice.
people I talked to today, there's what had a little dip. So that's good for you. But I think just like the point that we want to get across is like, that means that you get to increase rents on your asset that's appreciating every year while you're paying down the balance, but somebody else is paying down the balance on that mortgage.
Yep.
And I even want you to think like, even if I just break even if someone's just paying exactly what the mortgage is, someone else is paying that down for you, and you get to live in another house and have 2 homes. And so I think a lot of people are like cash flow and just all these buzzwords. And it's like, even if someone's paying just your mortgage and you're not cash flowing it out the gate, someone's paying down your mortgage, and that's huge. And that's a huge hedge against inflation.
And your cash flow will increase over time as rent
Yeah.
increases. So when I bought my first fourplex, my first property was my fourplex. It truly just broke even. It was like the best deal I could find. And I scoured and scoured and scoured. You know, it was like a $3,000 a month mortgage, and it was a $3,000 a month rental income. And it just kind of gradually, slowly increased. And now my gross rents on that property are $6,500 a month, 18 years later. And my mortgage is down because I've refinanced twice during that time to like, I don't know, $2,500 or so. So that delta does happen. Like, but one thing that I would say is I would be careful. The place where I see people get hurt is negative cash flowing, right? So I'd love for you to stay even, or just a little, even if it's like $200 a month positive, because I think one of the fastest ways to hate being a landlord is to write a check to be a landlord every month, right? But if you can break even over time, it'll grow, and then you'll start to really see some accumulation in cash flow. So cool. So this is just an illustration. This gal is a great follow on social media if you're into that. Her name's Casey Franchini. She owns a little company called Brick by Brick Wealth. And she built this great chart to just show kind of the power of accumulating these assets. And you don't have to scale to 10 homes. Honestly, if you could move twice and keep 2 homes, you would be hitting it so far out of the park in terms of your retirement that you'd be amazed. But if you want to get into it and go big, this is kind of just shows you how that can accelerate and accumulate. So her story is that she started a side business on Etsy selling branded things, and she was selling about $1,000 worth of stuff a month. So she bought a home, a single family home, and was able to save up in 20 months a down payment of $20,000, right? So then she buys her first home that moves down to the number 2 house there. So now she's cash flowing $500 a month on that first house, but she's still saving, she's still making her side gig of $1,000 a month. So now she can save $1,500 a month. So she can save up her next down payment of $20,000 in 14 months, right? 6 months faster. So then she buys her third house. Now she's got passive income from 2 rentals of $1,000 a month, right? So she could just quit her Etsy job, and now she's just replaced her Etsy job. But she continues to do that and has the $1,000 from each rental. So now she can save $2,000 a month. She can buy another rental in 10 months. So on and so forth until she's bought the 10th home. Now she's saving enough to buy a new rental every 3 months. So you can just see how this scales quickly, and it can add up. But, you know, like I said, if you have a side gig of $1,000, you can create passive cash flow. 2 houses, you can just quit that side gig and just manage your rentals. Any comments on that, Julia?
Nope. I think it's just a great example and kind of visual to see what could be. But again, like, I don't want you guys to be like, okay, I'm not going to get 10 houses. That's not realistic, but it's just, just to kind of show you guys that visual. And like he said, there's so much power in even just having one investment property, which is awesome.
But I will tell you that she has scaled to, I think she has maybe 6 rentals, but she's making $100,000 in passive income on her business.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
It can be, it can be for your retirement, or it can be, if anybody's into the FIRE, financial independence, retire early, it can be that for you as well, right?
Yeah.
So, cool. And so we can model this. I can model this out for people if they want to kind of see what it would look like. I can build this out, and this is one we built for a client. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I'm sure it's mind-numbing in terms of the numbers to look at, but basically we showed over a 20-year period of time with 5% rent increases and 5% appreciation in homes, how this borrower moved 3 times from his starter house to his forever house, kept these homes. He bought a new house at year 0, year 2, year 4, and year 6. And with that appreciation in 20 years, if you can see along the bottom there, he will have gross monthly rents of $25,000, while his housing expense is $9,800, giving him monthly income of just under $16,000 and appreciation of around $6 million. So the numbers can get really big without having to go, do 10 homes. If you could do this, like I said, even twice, you would put yourself in a really great position. Comments there?
Nope. Again, I just think it's, such a great visual, and it shows how powerful it is. And that really, it's like, by doing things this way, instead of like the 20% or 25% to get an investment property, your rate of return and the investment that you're putting into it is so much lower, but you're seeing such a big return, and it's awesome.
Yeah, and time is your friend. So the faster you can buy that second house and let somebody else start paying off that first house for you, and let time work in your favor and inflation work in your favor, that's the gold nugget there. So cool. Let's teach you how to do this. So the next steps and tactics, and we're going to send out a checklist with this afterwards. So we'll share this with everybody. But I can't stress enough that you have to treat your rental like a business. So we're going to go through how to
totally
do this.
agree with that.
Again, the fastest way to hate landlording is to sort of bootstrap it and not treat it like a business. So let's start with this. So first of all, you got to find the down payment for your next house. If you want to move and turn your current house into a rental, you got to find the down payment. So my recommendation would be go get a home equity line or a HELOC, home equity line of credit. Do that before you start looking at new homes. Get the biggest one you can. You're not paying for a HELOC unless you use it, right? So think of it as like a cheap credit card that's secured against your house. It's truly a line of credit. You get a credit card and a checkbook with it, and you have your money available. We can lend up to 90% of your available equity. So let's just say, for example, you own a $500,000 house with a $400,000 mortgage. That's 80%. So you can borrow another 10 to get you to 90. So that could get you a $50,000 home equity line. That can be your down payment on your home, on your new home. Go ahead. Did you want to comment?
And if you guys are like, I don't even know how much equity I have, should I even get a HELOC? Come to me. I'll do a CMA, which is a comparative market analysis, comparing other recently sold homes in your area to let you know about where you'll be at. I mean, if it's $20,000, it might not make as much sense, but if it's over 50, and some people might have a couple $100,000 worth of equity, then it's, you can do quite a few things with that if you want.
Yeah, and even if you just save up your own money for down payment and just use that, I would still recommend opening a home equity line before you move out of your current house, because I think of them as emergency and opportunity funds. So emergency in the sense that once you're a landlord, now you're responsible for 2 mortgages, right? And there are, vacancies can happen, repairs can happen, they can happen at the same time. And so the way I see people get hurt in owning property is they don't have liquidity. Liquidity is the number one thing, because as long as you can make that monthly payment on the mortgage and you can keep that property, you're going to make money over time. But if you have to sell because of an emergency that you don't have the money to handle, that's where you can really get hurt in real estate. So you won't have the availability of that money available to you before you move, because you can't get a HELOC on an investment property. So that's why you want to do it on your primary residence before you move. Then I think of it as an opportunity fund, because I have an open home equity line on my house that I'm not using right now. But if I find a property that I want to buy, I can write a check for the down payment. It's there. I want it there before I need it, because if I see an opportunity, especially if we go into a recession, that's where opportunities often happen. You want to be able to move quickly, because that's how you secure those opportunities.
Sorry, would you mind if I asked a quick question?
Please, yeah.
You said you can't get a home equity line of credit on an investment property. If you currently live, so I currently live in a duplex. I rent out the basement, and I own a duplex. I live in the upstairs and rent out the basement. If it was that, so I can still get a home equity line because it's my primary residence, even though it's okay, cool. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
And there are situations where you can get them on investment properties, and I might mean investment property like you don't live there, right?
Got it. Awesome.
But it's just you're much more limited in loan to value than you are on a primary residence. So like they might only lend you like 60% loan to value. And if you already have a first mortgage at 80%, that means you can't get a HELOC. So it's just better if you're thinking of turning your current home into a rental to get the HELOC before you start looking for the new home. Cool. All right. So get that open. So you're ready and have I think of that as your ammunition, if that makes sense. Okay. So then we prepare your current home to rent. We want to determine what you can rent it for and handle any obsolescence, right? So, renters are going to they're going to have different use patterns than you do on your home, right? That faucet that's a little bit leaky, that, drain that comes off the back of your house that isn't quite getting the water away from your foundation. The tenant's not going to pay as much attention to that as you will. So you want to kind of go through and I say childproof your house a little bit, because if it can be broken, a renter will find a way.
Yeah, it's almost like you still want to prepare it as if you were to sell it. So you can come to me and be like, what should I do? And it's like, let's service the HVAC, let's clean the carpets, let's walk through it and see what's going on. Because like he said, you might not hear from your tenant or whatever's going on, and you want to make sure that everything's like buttoned up and dialed. And as far as rents, I think obviously it's a very seasonal thing. Depending on what time of year you rent your house, you'll get a different amount. So right now in the summer months, that's when we get the peak rents, especially like August when people are going back to school. So I think something to consider. I wouldn't say like let it hold you back if the timing works for you in December, but also know like you might not be able to leverage your rents as much at certain times of the year. So just know like any of that prep work or questions about rent, you can totally come to me and I can give you some advice.
Yeah, and I like to sort of like secret shop my rentals, like pretend I'm a renter looking in the area and just go out and search, what similar rentals are going for.
Yeah, and you can do that on like Zillow, Rentler, Facebook Marketplace. If you just search wherever you live, places to rent, I would just start looking on all those websites, and you just are going to want to compare it to other like properties that are out there.
Yep. Cool. So once you've done those 2 things, you want to build your team. I just can't recommend this enough. I say second way to hate landlording the fastest, aside from writing a check every month, is going to fix the toilet every time it leaks. If you're a handy person and you just love doing that stuff, and maybe you have to do it for a little while your cash flow is building up, but as soon as you can, get a good handyman. The plumber is like your number 1 call. Maybe the HVAC is your number 2 call. And then of course, landscaping and snow removal to manage your yard and whatnot. Remember that as soon as you move out of the house, those things are now tax deductions. And so, the $100 plumber bill is really probably only $70 to you, right? So is it really worth you going down there at 8 o'clock at night versus calling that plumber. I just think having professionals that you can trust on your team is just huge. And, you know, the plumber deals with it all day, every day. So he's going to do it faster and more efficient than you are. And my principle is find somebody that works great, trust them and use them regularly, because there is going to be a time where you need them and they're going to be busy. And like my HVAC contractor will drop what he's doing because I've hired him to put in, you know, 5 full HVAC systems in different homes, right? So if I have something that's on the fritz, they're going to come and work with me faster than other people. So I think there's value in that too.
Yeah. And just on that note, like we both have really great contacts and people that we work with that are part of our teams. And so of course you don't need to take our recommendations, but if you're like, oh, wow, it's like feeling really overwhelming for me to like find all these, like we can help you find those resources and get you set up with your team.
Exactly. Cool. So then once you've built your team and you're ready to handle any issues that may arise there, prepare to list your property. I would highly recommend getting professional pictures and saving them so that every single time you just have those handy, you know, staged as you want it in your arsenal, so that as soon as they tell you that they're not renewing, boom, you're on it. You can get that property listed with beautiful photos ready to go.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like it's literally like $250 to hire a professional photographer. Like and it just, all these small things make it so that you guys are running it like a business, but also so that you can get more money. And you'd be surprised, like I think it's a good rule of thumb, like investing in higher quality things has you get a better quality from those things. And so again, those are all things that I can help with. I'm happy to post within my brokerage on our Pockets page about your rental, try to help you set up with a renter. One thing I will say, back to the treat it like a business, you might not want to rent to a friend. I'm not saying don't rent to friends and family, but it's a lot harder to treat things like a business when your friend messes something up or just something goes awry, or to raise the rents, or, you know, it's going to be harder to make business decisions when you're in that situation. So obviously it's your property, do whatever you want. But I think you hear a lot of horror stories about that. Like, you know, I'm losing a bunch of money every month because I let my friend live there and I feel so bad, even though I should be renting it for this. So, just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's wise advice. Cool. So, then set up. I really like Zillow for marketing and tenant screening. We have Zillow properties for our rental units, and once that's all set up in there, you can just reactivate it and it's good to go if you have a vacancy upcoming. So it's handy, right? Like it can screen tenants for you. That does all the marketing, can pull their credit. You can make them apply through there. They can even set up payment through there. So which leads us to our next piece, is set up a tenant payment platform. I like Zillow Rental Manager. We also use a service called DoorLoop for Propertyware, but I also have friends that are like legit landlords that just use Venmo, right? You can totally do that. But I don't know. If you decide to scale a little bit, it's nice to have a professional software. Like we pay $100 a month for DoorLoop, and it gives the tenant their own little portal, and they can pay through there. It deposits it right to our bank account, and it's easy. So it helps you be professional and come across professional to the tenants. Cool. So then we are going to market the home. Zillow was great. Like I said, I keep coming back to KSL in Utah is a great place. But don't throw out, if you want to do nightly rentals, you can of course do that through Airbnb or VRBO. And then also midterm rentals. We've been playing around with midterm rentals. Furnished Finder is a service that is sort of based around travel nurses for the most part, but it's not just travel nurses. A midterm rental is anything, 30 days plus, but less than a year, right? So we have a condo in Park City that we rented out it's a nightly rental from December to April. And then we found a midterm rental from the client, rented it from like June through October. So it can be a great way to do that if you have if you want to deal with a furnished place. You get a little bit higher rents than you would for a unfurnished long-term, but not quite as high as a nightly, but it's less wear and tear and less management than a nightly.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends too who were traveling during the pandemic, staying places for a month or two at a time using this website. Two, we are seeing more regulations with Airbnb and nightly rentals. So Furnished Finders is kind of like not a loophole, but just a more reliable way. Nightly rentals are obviously like a really great option. If you're in an HOA, you need to talk to your HOA about it. Single family, there shouldn't be any restrictions unless your house is in an HOA, but it's kind of like a self-policing thing for the most part. So some communities allow it, whether it's your city or not. But if your neighbor turns you in, it can be kind of shut down. So I think just if you're going to go nightly rental, obviously do like plenty of due diligence to make sure that it actually will work out, because I don't want anyone to lose out on a bunch of money thinking they're going to make it big on Airbnb and then it's just not what they expect. So
perfect. Okay, then you screen your applicants. Of course, we use again Zillow, and Rent Ready is another great resource to screen applicants. Definitely pull their credit, right? I like to get pay stubs. I like to see that I want to see their income is 3x rent. So if you're charging $1,000 of rent, I want to see $3,000 a month in income on a pay stub. That's, I think, the most important thing. But of course, credit's good, credit's important. And previous landlord history is something that I will spend time looking into as well. Then you sign a lease agreement and collect deposit. Here's a couple of different places that you can get good leases. UtahLandlady.com has a bunch of free Utah specific leases that are great. EasyLandlordForms.com, Zillow Rental Manager has that built in as well. I like to get deposits about equal to 1 month's rent. I usually just collect first month's and a deposit. And then communicate to your team, right? You need to let your homeowner's insurance agent know that it's no longer my personal home. I'm turning it into a rental. Surprisingly, that's going to lower your insurance costs because you're not insuring contents. You're just insuring the home, right? So let your homeowner's insurance agent know. Your CPA needs to know that I moved out and turned it into a rental on whatever, August 1st. And then an attorney. It's wise to form an entity and set up a bank account as a rental if you turn your home into a rental property. So the reason for forming an LLC and an entity is it doesn't really change your tax structure, but what it is for is asset protection. So if somebody slips and falls in front of the property, if the property's in an LLC, they can only go after the assets that are in the LLC. They can't go after your other assets like your new home or your brokerage accounts or your assets or anything like that. So it's insulating your property. And then you'll set up a bank account for that entity. And I would recommend that you set up the bank account such that all the money that you get for rent goes into that bank account and all the expenses come out of that bank account. That'll make your bookkeeping at the end of the year much, much easier. So you're not using that money for anything else other than just that property. So don't commingle it with your personal bank account. Start a new bank account with the LLC. Let the rent money come in, let the expenses come out, and then that will also help you at the end of the year prepare your taxes and books. Any comments on that?
And just kind of coming back to treating it like a business, like if you had a business, you would do all these things. And I think, especially with the CPA, just making sure you're getting all the tax benefits that you can and going to these experts to make sure that you're doing things properly. So.
Yeah. And when you turn your primary into a rental, you can start taking depreciation on the property. And so that's one thing, like if you're even breaking even on the property, it can be a win because the IRS allows you to depreciate the property. And what that means is they assume that it's worth less over time, even though we know that it's worth more over time. But what that depreciation does is it can offset your W-2 income. So let's say you have $5,000 of depreciation. Well, that, and instead of making $100,000 on your W-2, now it's $95,000. So you probably got a $2,000 tax refund just on the depreciation of your property. And that's a whole nother class that we can go into. There's some crazy things that you can do with that, with depreciation that can just be like mind-blowingly powerful. So maybe we'll have to do another class on that. Okay, so we want to help you guys. And so we have turned that into a checklist. And so we can send that to you. And then what we can also do is send you one of these real estate report cards for your specific home and any home that you're looking at, maybe considering buying. These are really cool because it shows you the 1 year and 5 year appreciation. It shows you the median home price. It shows you how many homes are for sale per 1,000 families in the neighborhood. It shows you the household formations versus the actual homes being built. So it can really tell you if it's a good, the sort of forward projections of your neighborhood. So I'm happy to send these out to anybody that would like them.
That, and if you guys need a CMA to just kind of see where your value is at, if you don't know, I'm happy to put that together. And then Drake can also do that analysis that was a couple slides back on just to break down the numbers. You can just see if you feel like it's realistic. So
yeah. So that's it. Reach out to us. We'll send out a recording of this. We'll send out the checklist, and I'm happy to build any real estate report cards for anybody that needs them. Hopefully this is of value to you guys, and I'm happy to hang around for a little bit if there's any specific questions that we can answer.
And I'll say we're pretty good Instagram follows. We put a lot of education out, which for me is a big part of my platform. I want people to feel educated and empowered to make decisions that make them stoked and make their life better. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, we'll hang on for a couple minutes.
Yeah, I've got some questions if that's all right.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Okay, so I guess I was confused on, well, not on anything that you said. I guess I was thinking what you do is you get a home equity line of credit and then you use that to buy the house. So you saying that you get the home equity line of credit and then you use that for the down payment. So what you're saying is you would then have 2 mortgages and then the home equity line of credit to pay off.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, that's one way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I don't think I would say. So what you're thinking is I'd get a home equity line of credit and then pay cash for the second house.
Yeah, I guess that's how I was thinking that you're supposed to go about that. I didn't realize that you could do the home equity line of credit and just use that for the down payment. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say I in a lower interest rate. I've seen people do that in a lower interest rate environment, but right now home equity line is prime plus 1 to 3. Prime's 8.5 as of yesterday. So probably doesn't make that much sense. But the reason I like having the line of credit is, yeah, you can use money from the home equity line to buy, say 5% down on the new property. You're using a lot more leverage there. And then because you also want to use the good financing on that new property because you get the best financing on a primary residence property. So it's going to be better terms on a primary residence mortgage than it is on a HELOC. And then you still have the HELOC available. What if right? So let's say you use the 5% down to buy a new property. And in 2 years, you still have that HELOC available. So then you can take another 5% down out of that HELOC and buy the next property. If you wanted to, scale like that. Otherwise, you still have the HELOC available for repairs and other issues that might come up during that, during your time as a landlord.
And what's the usual timeline to pay off the HELOC if you take money out to or to pay it back if you take money out to put down the home
So the way a home equity line works is it's a 10-year draw and a 20-year repay. So for the first 10 years, you can spend it up and pay it down as many times as you want, just like a credit card. But then 20 years, what's ever left at that time starts amortizing and you have to start paying that back. But what you can also do at that time is just go get a new HELOC and start a new draw period over.
Okay.
Right. So the way I operate mine personally is I got one back, 5 years ago on that first fourplex that I keep talking about. As it was at such a low loan to value at the time they would do it. I used the HELOC to remodel a couple of the units. And then I just took that increased rent and I'm taking all the increased rent I was able to get and just piling it back onto the HELOC. And so I just treat it as like, I'm going to use that money and then aggressively pay it down so that I can use it again for my next project, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you don't have to pay it all. And I should say the minimum payment on those things is interest only. And so like if you're, for example, using that as your down payment for a new house, what you want to do is you want to take your current mortgage plus whatever you think you're going to borrow on your HELOC, right? Consider that payment and the new mortgage on the new house, right? And say, okay, whatever, say my current mortgage at my current house is $2,000. I'm going to borrow some money on the HELOC. Say that's a $500 payment. Can I rent my current house for $2,500 or more? Yes. Okay, great. Maybe I can rent it for $3,000. So I'm going to have $500 cash flow that I can put towards, that's going to be income. So my new mortgage that's now whatever, $3,000, I only have to pay $2,500 of it myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
just,
you're paying off your HELOC as part of the rents that you're charging people
yeah, if you want.
in that scenario.
But
Like
you'd
that's
be-
something that you could try to do as well.
Totally. You'd be surprised, like, let me just pull this up really quickly if I can. Why is it not letting me? I'll stop sharing my screen, maybe that'll help. You know, like if you borrowed, say, $30,000 on a HELOC times, say it's at 10%, that's only a $250 a month payment, right? So to get your down payment for the new house could only be as little as like $250 a month on the HELOC.
Nice. Okay.
And too, like, you don't just have to take the HELOC, right? Like, if you're like, I don't necessarily want to take the HELOC, maybe you just open it not for the down payment, you open it for the expenses and the leverage. Maybe you have other money saved up that you want for the new down payment, and then that just opens up more leverage and options down the line if you don't feel like taking on that extra payment. And remember, it's like you only have to pay it off if you take it. That's how it works. So
You're not charged any money to have a home equity line if you're
Yeah.
not using it.
yeah.
That's why I like to have them. Like, it doesn't hurt you to open it up and have it sitting there, because you're not paying for it if you're not using it.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a bunch of chat questions here. Let's see. Do we have any? Okay, we just said thank you and goodbye, it looks like. Cool. All right. Any other questions?
Sorry, I got one more if nobody else has. I
Yeah,
don't want
go
to pick
for
up all the
I
time.
love it.
So I guess again, I'm me just being misinformed or not knowing enough. I basically thought that you're either going to do a 20% down or an FHA, which is like what, 3.5. So you've been talking about 5% mortgages or 5% down mortgages. Could you speak to those a little bit more? How they're defined or stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's just it's a conforming mortgage, conventional conforming mortgage. With, those are Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. We've probably heard of those agencies. They're called agency mortgages as well sometimes. Yeah, I mean, as a first-time home buyer on an agency conforming mortgage, you can do as low as 3% down. But as if you're, buying a new primary residence, you can buy with an agency conforming mortgage with as little as 5% down. And so a conforming mortgage, who is that good for? It's good for somebody that has a high credit score and is buying a primary residence. So an FHA, really what the FHA is for is folks that have sort of mediocre credit. I'd say below 700, an FHA could make sense because conforming mortgage insurance gets expensive as your credit score goes down. But if you have a high credit score, a conforming mortgage is going to be the cost-effective way to go. So you definitely do not need 20% down to buy a new primary residence.
Yeah. And I think that's why going through this scenario, like if you hold this property and you move into a new primary residence, that's why you can only put 5% down. If you just simply use the HELOC to purchase an investment property, you're going to be at 25% for the down payment.
Yes. If you're buying an investment property, you're putting 25% down.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But actually, just to that point, if you got to the point where you were like doing some pretty heady investment stuff, there are people that will use their home equity line of credit to pay cash for a property so that in a case where it's like a really competitive situation or it's a distressed property where like maybe you can't even get a mortgage on it. Like I bought a property sort of in Marmalade in 2012 that we couldn't have financed with a mortgage because it was torn apart. It was a bank-owned property and it was unfinanceable. So we had to pay cash for that property, but we didn't really pay cash. We had private money, but you could do the same thing with a home equity line. So the power of that HELOC is you can treat it like cash if you want to. That's why I call it an opportunity fund as well, though, because if you do see that property that's like, you know, disabled or not disabled, distressed, then you can pounce on it using your HELOC.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Sweet. Well, thank you guys for coming. Hopefully it was valuable. You can always, our contact information is there. You'll get a follow-up email from us. So if you have any questions or want to run personal scenarios, we're always happy to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks again for coming.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I know it's valuable and we appreciate you guys joining. I hope that this was helpful. And again, just know that we're a resource. So if you're unsure about something, like come to us. I want you guys to feel educated and empowered to make the best decisions for you guys. So just know that we're here and we support you.